Are you
What
all
if
right,
the
sir?
maid you fired
My
in
arm,
anger
it
turned out
hurts.
to be the only person protecting your family's deepest secret?
What happened?
This is the story of a wealthy American
all right,
family,
sir?
a glass
My
of
arm, it
wine,
hurts.
and a truth hidden for 30 years. Welcome to Folktales Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and share with friends.
Are you all
Let
right,
me tell
sir?
you a story that
My
will
arm,
stay
it
in your heart
hurts.
for a long time. It is a story about love, betrayal,
happened?
truth, and the kind of loyalty
you
that
all
you
right,
don't
sir?
find every day.
My arm, it
It happened
hurts.
right here in the United States, inside a big house that most people
happened?
only dream about. But as you'll
you all
see,
right, sir?
no matter how big
My
the house,
arm, it hurts.
no matter how much money a family has, pain and secrets
What
can
happened?
still live inside those walls. The family at the center of this story was the Harrisons. At the head of the family was Mr. John Harrison, a wealthy man in his late 70s. He had made his money in real estate and investments. For years, people in town looked up to him as a man of great success. But behind his strong reputation, age and illness had taken their toll. John was battling Parkinson's disease, and the sickness had left him weak and often dependent on others. Now, in every big house there are not only the rich people who own it, but also the quiet workers who keep everything running. And in the Harrison estate, there was one woman who stood out. Her name was Elena Brooks. Elena was 32 years old, a live-in maid who had been with the family for years. She was hard-working, respectful, and always kept to herself. But what people didn't always see was her heart. She cared for Mr. Harrison in a way that was rare. She didn't just do her job. She treated him with dignity, with kindness, as if he were her own father. And maybe that's why he trusted her more than anyone else in that house. But not everyone felt the same way about Elena. Standing in sharp contrast was Mary Harrison, the wife of John's only son, David Harrison. Mary was beautiful, elegant, and sharp-tongued. She loved the power that came with being married into the Harrison family. To her, the estate was her kingdom. And she could not stand the sight of a maid like Elena being so close to her father-in-law. Now picture this. One stormy evening, the sky was dark with thunder, and rain slapped against the tall windows of the Harrison estate. Inside, the grand living room was glowing with the warm light of chandeliers, the kind of beauty you see in magazines. But peace was far from that house. Elena was there, helping Mr. Harrison move through the room. His body was frail, his steps shaky. He leaned against her like a child leaning on someone they trusted completely. She had her arm gently around him, protecting him, steadying him. His head rested slightly against her shoulder. It was a quiet, tender moment, but it didn't last. Because suddenly, Mary's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Get away from him, you filthy little roach." Her high heels clicked across the marble floor as she stormed into the room. She was holding a wine glass in one hand, and her eyes were blazing with fury. The sight of her father-in-law clinging to a maid disgusted her. "Elena," she spat, "you are nothing but a mop with legs. How dare you stand so close to him? Move now." Elena trembled, but she didn't move. Instead, she tightened her hold on Mr. Harrison. And then, something remarkable happened. In a weak voice, Mr. Harrison whispered from behind her, "She stays. Don't make her leave. Please." Those words broke the silence. Imagine the shock. This powerful man, once feared and respected, now fragile and broken, asking a maid to stay by his side. But Mary didn't care. Her anger only grew hotter. She lifted her chin and hissed, "This is my house. I am David's wife. When your time is up, old man, everything here will belong to us. And you," she glared at Elena, "you'll be thrown out like the trash you are." Her words echoed in the room like poison. And then, in a sudden burst of rage, she hurled the wine glass across the room. Time slowed. The glass flew, the red wine swirling like blood in the air. And then crash. The glass shattered against Elena's arm as she twisted to shield Mr. Harrison. Shards of crystal cut deep into her skin, and blood dripped down her sleeve. Gasps filled the room. The old man clung tighter to her, trembling, while Elena winced in pain but refused to move away. And at that exact moment, David Harrison walked in. He froze in the doorway. his expensive shoes stepping onto drops of wine and blood on the floor. He saw his father crying, the maid bleeding, and his wife standing there with a satisfied smile. "Mary!" he shouted. "What happened here?" In an instant Mary's expression changed. Her fury melted into tears, soft and glittering. She ran toward him, sobbing dramatically. "Oh, thank God you're here, David," she cried. "She attacked your father. Look at her arm. She tried to make it seem like I hurt her. She's been manipulating him all along." Her voice was trembling, her body shaking as if she were the victim. Elena shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. "That's not true," she whispered. She threw the glass. "I was protecting him." But Mary screamed louder. "She's lying. She's always been a snake, trying to get close to him, trying to make us look bad. You gave her too much freedom, David. And now look." David stood still, torn between two voices. His wife's cries and his maid's trembling truth. He bent down to his father. "Dad, tell me. What happened?" The old man, weak but desperate, lifted a shaking hand. His trembling finger pointed toward Elena. "She saved me." The words were so faint, so fragile, they could barely be heard. But before they could sink in, Mary snapped. "He doesn't know what he's saying. He's confused." David's mind was spinning. He didn't know who to believe. He looked at Elena again, her arm bleeding, her eyes filled with pain but also with honesty. Then he looked at Mary, his wife, beautiful and crying, begging for his trust. Finally he shook his head. I need space. Elena, just leave the room." Her face broke. "But I didn't." "Please," David interrupted, his voice cracking. Elena swallowed hard. She pressed her sleeve against her bleeding arm, bowed her head, and walked slowly down the long corridor, her footsteps echoing with heartbreak. That night, the Harrison estate felt colder than the storm outside. The marble halls whispered with gossip among the staff. Some said Elena had gone too far. Others whispered that she had crossed a dangerous line by standing up to Mary. In the servants' quarters, Elena sat alone, wrapping her arm with gauze, tears slipping quietly down her face. Her phone buzzed. A message from her younger sister back home in Georgia, begging for updates on their mother's cancer treatment. But Elena couldn't answer. Her job, her income, her very survival had just been ripped away. And upstairs, while Elena wept, Mary lay beside David in their master bedroom. Her tears were gone now. Her voice was smooth, almost sweet, as she whispered into her husband's ear. "She needs to go, David. We can't keep staff who make threats in this house. You know it." David said nothing, but his mind kept flashing back to his father's weak, trembling hand pointing at Elena. The next morning, Elena was called into David's study. She walked in slowly, her head bowed, her arm still bandaged. David didn't even look at her at first. "Elena," he said finally, "you crossed a line. I don't know what really happened last night, but there's too much confusion, too much risk. You're dismissed. Effective immediately." Elena's heart shattered. She whispered, "I would never hurt him. You know that." But David raised a hand to silence her. "Enough. Just go." She nodded slowly, whispering, "Tell him goodbye for me." And with that, she walked out of the mansion, her shoulders straight but her spirit broken. Behind her, as the front door closed with a heavy echo, Mr. Harrison's voice could be heard from upstairs, weak but desperate. "Elena! Elena!" But there was no reply, only silence. And in that silence, the truth of what really happened was buried, at least for now. The Harrison mansion was quiet that morning, but it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the heavy, uneasy silence that follows after a storm. The grand chandeliers still shone brightly, the marble floors still reflected the morning sun, but everything felt colder, emptier. Elena was gone. And in the servants' quarters, her name lingered like a forbidden word. Some of the staff shook their heads, whispering that she had finally gone too far. Others bit their tongues, afraid to speak in her defense. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Something about her dismissal didn't sit right. Upstairs, in the master suite, Mary walked around with the grace of a queen who had just conquered her enemy. She poured herself a glass of orange juice, humming softly, as if nothing had happened. David sat at the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the floor. He hadn't slept all night. His mind replayed the scene over and over. His father's shaking hand pointing at Elena, the blood on her arm, the broken wine glass, and his wife's tears. He wanted to believe Mary. After all, she was his wife. But there was something in his father's eyes, something he couldn't shake. That same morning, unable to quiet his thoughts, David found himself wandering into a room he rarely visited, the mansion's security room. Rows of monitors glowed in the dim space, showing every corner of the estate. The head of security, an older man named Frank, was startled when David walked in. "Mr. Harrison," Frank said, straightening. "Is something wrong?" "Pull up last night's footage," David ordered, his voice low and tight. Frank hesitated. "All of it. All of it." So Frank scrolled through the files until the stormy evening appeared on the screens. The silent cameras replayed everything. Elena holding his father, Mary storming in, her anger flashing across her face. And then it happened. The glass in Mary's hand, the sudden throw, the explosion of shards against Elena's arm as she shielded the old man. David froze. His stomach turned. His breath caught in his throat. "Play it again," he whispered. The footage looped. The truth was undeniable. Mary had lied. Elena had been telling the truth all along. David's hands trembled against the console. He remembered Elena's soft voice saying, "I didn't do anything wrong." He remembered her walking out the front door, dismissed and humiliated. And he remembered his father calling her name from upstairs. Shame washed over him like a wave. He had failed her. Worse, he had failed his own father. "Sir?" Frank asked quietly, noticing David's pale face. David shook his head. "Say nothing about this. To no one." "Yes, sir." David left the security room in silence, his chest heavy with guilt. For the rest of the day, he avoided Mary. He couldn't even look at her without seeing the frozen image of her arm throwing that glass. That night, unable to sleep, David finally went to his father's room. Mr. Harrison sat near the window in a large chair, a shawl draped over his frail shoulders. He looked older than ever, but when David entered, his eyes lifted slowly. "I saw the footage," David said, his voice breaking. "Dad, I was wrong." Tears welled in the old man's eyes. His lips trembled as he whispered, "She saved me. I begged you to see her. I begged you." David knelt beside him, his head bowed. "I know. See it now. But I don't know how to fix this." The old man's hand shook as he gripped his son's arm. "Then go. Find her. Before it's too late." Those words rang in David's mind like a command. The very next evening, David found himself driving through the city in his sleek black car. But instead of the polished streets of his neighborhood, he was heading into the smaller parts of town, places he had not set foot in for years. He finally spotted her. Through the rain-smeared window of a modest diner, Elena sat alone in a booth. Her head was bent low, her bandaged arm resting on the table beside a steaming mug of coffee. She looked tired, broken, but still dignified. David stepped inside, his expensive shoes clicking softly on the diner floor. Elena looked up, startled. Her eyes widened in disbelief when she saw him standing there. "Mr. Harrison," she said quietly, her voice stiff, formal. "Elena," he whispered back, almost pleading. She gripped her coffee mug tighter. "I don't work for you anymore." He slid into the booth across from her, rain dripping from his coat. "I'm not here as your employer. I'm here as a man who failed you." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by the dull clink of her spoon against the mug. Finally David spoke. "I saw everything. The cameras. They captured it all. You told the truth. And I didn't believe you." Elena's eyes glistened. That's not something you can take back, Mr. Harrison. I know, he said quickly. But I can try to make it right. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. She frowned. What is this? A new contract, he explained. Full reinstatement. Triple salary. Private medical coverage for your mother in Georgia. And your own suite, right next to my father's room. Her breath caught. She blinked hard, shoulders stiffening. Why now? Out of guilt. No, David said firmly. Because my father trusts you. And because now I understand why. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then her voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper. You don't know everything. David leaned forward. Then tell me. Her eyes clouded with something deeper, something heavier than pain. There are things about your father, about your family, that you don't know. Things that could break everything you believe about yourself. David's heart pounded. What do you mean? She shook her head. Not here. Not now. Let me come back to the house. Let me care for him. But not just as a maid. As someone who's carried a secret for nearly 30 years. He studied her face, realizing this was no ordinary woman. This was someone who had given everything. Her time, her loyalty, her very blood for his father. This isn't just about the wine glass, is it? He asked softly. No, she whispered, her eyes shining with a truth she couldn't yet share. Not even close. She slowly stood, taking the envelope in her hand. She hesitated before leaving, turning just enough to speak without meeting his eyes. I'll come back. But you're not ready to hear the rest yet. As she walked away, David whispered into the rain-filled night. Will I ever be? She paused, her back still to him, and said, You will. When the truth is ready. And with that she was gone. The next morning, the Harrison estate looked the same from the outside. Shining white walls, perfectly trimmed lawns, luxury cars parked neatly in the driveway. But inside something was changing. When Elena walked through the grand entrance once again, she did not come as a maid returning in shame. She came as Mr. Harrison's official caregiver. Her black coat brushed against the marble floor as she walked calmly, her expression unreadable. The staff froze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes darted, whispers rippled through the halls. She's back, one muttered. I thought she was fired, another whispered. Mary won't like this, someone else sneered. But Mary was gone. After a long confrontation the night before, David had told her to leave. She had packed her things in silence, her pride too bruised to argue. And now, for the first time, the mansion was free of her poisonous presence. Only one staff member, a quiet dishwasher named Natalie, dared to smile at Elena as she passed. Elena gave her a small nod in return before continuing toward the east wing. When she opened the door to Mr. Harrison's room, he was already sitting upright, dressed and waiting. His eyes lit up at the sight of her. Elena, he whispered. She walked over and gently took his hand. I told you I'd come back, she said softly. He nodded, tears brimming. I never doubted it. Not for a second. But as Elena sat beside him, quietly adjusting his blanket, she knew the hardest part of her story was still waiting. A truth buried deep for nearly 30 years. A truth that could save or destroy the man she was slowly learning to trust. The Harrison estate had always been known for its silence, the kind of silence that came with wealth. Wide spaces, polished marble floors, long empty hallways where footsteps echoed like whispers. But now the silence inside the mansion felt different. It felt tense, heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Elena had returned, but she was not the same woman who had been sent away. She moved through the house with a calm dignity, no longer the invisible maid in the background. She was now Mr. Harrison's caregiver, trusted above all else. The staff, though shocked, learned quickly to step aside when she walked by. David kept his distance at first. He was grateful she had agreed to return, but he could feel there was more, something she was not saying. Her words in the diner echoed in his mind. There are things about your family you don't know. Things that could break everything you believe about yourself. And so, as days turned into weeks, David watched her closely. She cared for his father with the same patience she always had, but there was something in her eyes when she looked at the old man. It wasn't just duty. It was love, a deep, unspoken love that carried years of history. One evening, David found himself standing outside his father's room. The door was slightly open, and he heard voices inside. "You've carried this secret too long," Mr. Harrison's frail voice said. "I couldn't tell him," Elena whispered. "Not when Mary was still here. Not when he wasn't ready to listen." "He deserves to know," the old man said, his voice trembling. "He deserves the truth, even if it breaks him." David froze. His heart pounded. He pushed the door open gently. "Know what?" he asked. Elena turned sharply, her face pale. Mr. Harrison lowered his head, ashamed. "Dad!" David pressed, stepping inside. "What truth?" Elena stood slowly, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. For a long moment she said nothing. Then finally she spoke. "David," she began softly, "the man you've called father all your life is not your biological father." The words hit him like a thunderclap. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the doorframe. "What?" he whispered. Mr. Harrison closed his eyes, his face lined with pain. "It's true, son. You're mine in every way that matters, but by blood. You belong to another man." David's chest heaved. His world tilted. Everything he thought he knew about himself felt like it was slipping away. "Who?" he demanded. "Who is my real father?" Elena swallowed hard, tears glistening in her eyes. 30 years ago, before your mother married Harold, she was in love with someone else. A man who worked on this estate as a gardener. His name was Daniel. They were young, reckless, and deeply in love. But your grandfather forbade it. He forced your mother into marrying Harold, for wealth and status. By then, she was already pregnant with you. David's head spun. His breath came in short gasps. "So, all this time you all knew?" Mr. Harrison's lips quivered. "I knew the moment I saw you. You didn't have my eyes. You didn't have my blood. But I chose you, David. I raised you as my own because I loved your mother, and because when I looked at you, I saw the son I never had." Tears spilled down David's cheeks. He turned to Elena, his voice raw. "And you? How do you know all this?" Elena's voice broke as she whispered. "Because I was there. I was the one your mother confided in. I was her closest friend. And when she died, I promised her I would never let you feel unloved. That's why I stayed year after year, caring for this house, caring for Harold, even when no one else would. Because in some way, you were also mine to protect." David shook his head, his heart heavy with betrayal. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why keep me in the dark all these years?" Elena stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Because the truth is heavy, David. And sometimes love chooses silence, just to protect a heart." For a long moment, the room was filled only with the sound of David's ragged breathing. Then he sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he muttered. Mr. Harrison, with all the strength he had left, reached forward and gripped his son's arm. "You're my son," he said firmly. "Blood doesn't change that. Love makes a family, not DNA." David lifted his head, his eyes red. He looked at the old man, then at Elena. Two people who had shaped his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. Slowly he nodded. "Then I choose love too. I choose to be your son. And I choose to forgive." Elena's tears finally spilled. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Mr. Harrison wept too, his frail body trembling. And in that moment something in the room shifted. The years of silence, lies, and hidden pain began to lift. From that night onward, things changed in the Harrison mansion. David no longer looked at Elena as just an employee. He saw her as part of his family, a woman who had carried a promise for decades and had loved him silently through it all. He arranged for her to have her own quarters, not in the servants' wing, but in the east side of the mansion, close to his father. The staff whispered, confused at first, but gradually they understood. Elena wasn't just a maid. She was something far greater. As weeks passed, David also found himself seeking out the name of the man who had given him life. Daniel, the gardener. But Daniel had long since passed away. All that remained were stories, old photographs, and memories shared by Elena. David listened to every word, piecing together the fragments of a man he never knew. And though it hurt to realize he would never meet his biological father, it gave him peace to know where he came from. Mary, on the other hand, never returned. The divorce papers were signed quickly, and the scandal was quietly buried. For the first time in years, the Harrison household breathed freely. One warm spring afternoon, David walked out into the gardens. The flowers were in bloom, and the air smelled sweet. Elena was there, tending to the roses with careful hands. Mr. Harrison sat nearby in a wheelchair, his blanket draped over his lap. David stood with them, watching the sunlight dance across the petals. "You know," he said quietly, "for so long I thought this house was nothing but walls and wealth. But now I see it was people. It was love. That's what makes a home." Elena looked up at him, her eyes shining with pride. Mr. Harrison smiled faintly, squeezing his son's hand. And for the first time in a very long time, David felt whole. Not because he had money or status or even blood ties, but because he finally understood the truth. Family is not defined by who gives you life, but by who stays to love you through it. That night, as the mansion grew quiet and the stars stretched across the sky, David sat in his father's study, writing in his journal. "The truth broke me," he wrote, "but it also set me free. I thought betrayal would be the end of me, but it became the beginning of something new. Elena's strength, my father's love, even my mother's secret, they all shaped me. And now I know who I am. I am David Harrison, son of love, son of sacrifice, and son of truth." He closed the journal, exhaled deeply, and for the first time in years he felt peace. The story of the Harrisons was no longer one of lies and silence. It was now a story of forgiveness, healing, and love that outlived even the deepest secrets. And as Elena stood quietly by the window, watching the night sky, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. She had kept her promise. She had guarded the truth until the right time. And now, at last, the burden was no longer hers alone.